Mr. President, Calzona is in a major catastrophic state, as you are already aware. I'm here today to provide you with some legal recommendations for how to go about addressing this most unfortunate situation. Under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the Suspension Clause of the Constitution, you may suspend the writ of habeas corpus. Because Calzona is in a state of rebellion and lawlessness at this time, this action is absolutely required to ensure the public safety. While the Constitution does not explicitly state which branch of government may suspend the writ of habeas corpus, most authorities have agreed that only Congress should exercise this authority. Therefore, I would recommend consulting with Congress first so that you may secure a congressional authorization to suspend this individual freedom. The suspension of habeas corpus has occurred only a handful of times throughout history, and each time it has occurred, this is the route that former presidents have always taken. In regards to the Stafford Act, you may and you must now issue a major disaster declaration. A geomagnetic storm resulting from an eruption on the sun is what caused the massive damage to the electrical infrastructure in Calzona. Because this was a natural catastrophe, you may issue the major disaster declaration, which provides for a wider range of federal assistance from the federal government to the affected area. Services of debris removal and emergency protective measures are employed as federal resources, the same way they are under the declaration of a national emergency. But the major disaster declaration also allocates resources for permanent repair work on roads, bridges, water control facilities, public buildings, as well as the electrical infrastructure. The governor has already made communication with us at the White House, urging that we please help and describing the state as having descended into chaos. Since the state is not currently capable of handling the catastrophe on its own, you may declare the disaster declaration by the governor's request. At some point, though, you will need to get a detailed description from the governor about the event itself, estimated damages, local resources the state has used or will use to respond to the crisis, and an explanation as to why federal assistance is required. You also inquired about which Department of Homeland Security agencies you should bring in to aid with the efforts. Firstly, I would recommend that you call on FEMA to coordinate disaster mitigation and response for any residents in Calzona requiring aid or assistance. I would then recommend bringing in the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency to help in attempting to restore the electrical infrastructure in a coordinated manner, as well as to protect the cybersecurity network from external threats while Calzona is still vulnerable. Sorry, I said vulnerable if you missed that last word, Mr. President. Lastly, I would recommend that you call on the Transportation Security Administration to monitor and to protect any goods that are being transported into the state. Your last question was regarding whether or not you could use the military and the Calzona National Guard to help restore law and order to the affected area. You wanted to make sure that if this could be done, it would not be violating the Posse Comitatus Act. Mr. President, you may use the Calzona National Guard under the Title 10 status of the United States Code, allowing the National Guard to be put under federal authority to provide federal services. It is during this time within which you, Mr. President, will assume the Commander-in-Chief title from the governor while the federal government funds the response activities. Please note that if the National Guard is under the federal Title 10 status rather than the state duty Title 12 status, they may no longer serve as a law enforcement branch. You must make this clear to the National Guard that they may no longer enforce or execute laws, or you may be held in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. The only authority that the National Guard is granted under their federal status is to assist in the federal relief and response efforts. Unfortunately, we must take the last resort option and impose temporary martial law in the affected Calzona areas. I would recommend that you invoke Articles 251 and 252 of the Insurrection Act in order to allow military support to state authorities, as well as to use the military to enforce federal law. As we understand it, the law enforcement agencies here are no longer able to travel or even communicate with one another, leading to a state of anarchy and violence. This state of anarchy would allow you, Mr. President, to utilize Section 252 of the Insurrection Act to use the military to enforce federal laws in place of the civil laws that are no longer able to function. When civil society begins operating again, you must immediately end the martial law declaration. These are my recommendations. Please take them under your advisement and let me know if I may be of further assistance. Thank you.